Hey, good evening, everybody. It is Monday, May 11th. This is Tim Ash, President of the Vermont State Senate, here with my daily update on Vermont's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Tonight's update will be fairly brief. I want to talk about an announcement that the governor made today and also talk about a few other items that will be coming up in the days ahead that I want to provide more information on. So today, the governor at his, I think a few times a week, he does a press conference where he sometimes outlines new proposals, sometimes just gives updates on the healthcare front in the public health pandemic. So the first bit of good news is there were 0 positive tests yesterday across the state, which is obviously good news. We have about 14 people who are currently either hospitalized with COVID-19 or under suspicion of having COVID-19. As I've said in previous updates, this is less than 20% of the amount we were facing in our hospital rooms back about a month ago. So also a sign that the public health measures across the state have been largely working. Of course, we have to continue to be vigilant, but it is good to take stock for all the sacrifice people have made, and people have made tremendous sacrifice, both in terms of health, work environment, their economic well-being. It does appear that our health outcomes are very, very good indeed relative to other states, which means that as painful as everything has been to go through, the trade-off has been keeping many people from becoming sick in the first place and ultimately keeping many people from dying. So I guess maybe that's a bit obvious since that's all we've been thinking about the last 2 months, but still worth reflecting on from time to time. So today, the governor made an announcement which I've heard some feedback already from constituents who are not thrilled by this, others who are very, very happy to hear that the governor is authorizing what is called non-essential retail to open up with some restrictions beginning a week from today on Monday, May 18th. So essential retail was considered things that you cannot do without for basic living. Grocery stores, things like that are obvious. Places where you could get materials to use in your garden, maybe not as obvious, but were permitted under certain conditions. So this announcement today means that places like bookstores, just to use the example that the governor gave, would be allowed to open effective a week from today, Monday the 18th. Now, that does come with restrictions that mean it's not business as usual. Each of the establishments that elects to open, because of course many may choose not to for a variety of reasons, can only allow up to 25% capacity in the store at any one given time. You have 100 people normally allowed to be roaming through the aisles of a bookstore. No more than 25 would be allowed under this scenario, or 25 inclusive of staff. Also, any employer that has more than 10 employees will be required to have basically a training program to educate the employees as they return about the safe conditions. Obviously, in many retail establishments, there are a lot of surfaces that people touch regularly, which is a primary concern that people have in terms of the spread of infection. Also, there will be what is called sector-specific guidance. And what that means is that different types of retail establishments will likely have to have like a plan in place that can be reviewed by the state if there's suspicion that people aren't practicing safe workplace conditions for either the employees or the patrons. So it is going to be a bit of a not a Wild West. It will be highly variable the way different retailers make decisions in the next week about whether or not to open. Not all will open because some will not want to even raise the possibility that people would spread the infection at their particular establishment. Others are going to be very happy to open up and have some revenue coming back in, especially if they were not able to do curbside or online sales. But of course, compliance with all of these different conditions will be the basis for continued easing in the weeks and months ahead. But as I said, some constituents were not happy to hear about any opening at this point because for fear that it's too soon. A number of other constituents contacted me and said that they are happy to see that our public health outcomes are now being aligned with a gradual reopening, which they felt was warranted. So that comes with the territory of being an elected official. You hear from both sides on almost every single issue, and you have to make a judgment. In this case, the judgment call is the governor's, not the legislature's, but we will continue to work with them to make sure that the safest conditions are there. Now, I will say one of the things I'm particularly concerned about is that the employees at these retail establishments will be required to wear masks, which I think is a good thing. However, the governor is still not requiring that the customers wear masks. I think that is not a good thing. I think that people should protect the employees by wearing a mask when they're the customer going in, because the mask that the employee is wearing does not protect him or her from contracting it from others. It helps reduce the spread from the employee to the customer. And so I feel like at the most basic level, it should be a two-way street with each person protecting the other. And that's how public health is supposed to work. So I'll continue to advocate directly with the governor to make the requirement that both the customers and the employees wear masks. I hope I will prevail, but at the present, that's ultimately left in the governor's hands. A couple other items from today. The unemployment situation, which you've heard me talk about over the last 2 months, and many of the things that you've communicated to me that I've passed on directly to the governor or to his team have helped make things happen faster. For some of you, you may say that was fast, and your dark humor would be I would appreciate that as someone who understands how difficult that has been. The final push that has helped reduce what they believe was about 90% of the existing backlog was the addition of more than 100 new call takers at a company that does call taking for several state government programs, and they added about 100 plus people, maybe more in recent days. That is attributed with the reason that the backlog has been eliminated. So I guess there's really two things I want to highlight there. First, thank you for telling me what's really going on. And I took some of you at your encouragement, and I called all the different unemployment assistance numbers in the state of Vermont to see whether the messages made any sense, whether I got bounced off the phone, whether there were answering machines where you could leave information. So a lot of my advocacy with the governor came from suggestions from you, and then I followed up and tried to put myself in the shoes of someone who right now needs to get unemployment or the new pandemic unemployment program. But the other thing is, we were calling for the addition of these call takers quite a while ago. And the Department of Labor, for some reason, kept thinking that their strategies would solve the problem. And a number of us were very vocal saying, add call takers. It is the single best way that you will have a more humane process for people who are in very bad situations, and will likely move this back, get rid of this backlog. In the end, it came way too late from my point of view, but it got done. The money's flowing, which is good. But I still welcome anybody to contact me if you are still going through the labyrinth or maze of unemployment eligibility applications, because I know that while the numbers are going in the right direction after 2 very long months, there are still people out there who are struggling to get through, still struggling to enter things into the computer system, and so on. 2 last items. The first is around our elections. So another thing that the legislature and the governor have, we don't have a strong difference of opinion at this time about how we're going to conduct our elections, but let me explain the 2 different elections and why their circumstances are different. So the first is the primary election. So the primary election, unlike the general election, requires a little bit of extra information that the voter provides to the Secretary of State or the local voting officials, because there are three major parties, meaning that there are three primary elections conducted in August. So what we anticipate is going to be the case is that for the August election, every registered voter will receive an absentee ballot request form, either a postcard or a piece of mail, asking you to, if you wish to, return the form indicating which political party's primary you wish to participate in, and then the ballots will go out the way a normal absentee request would go. In some ways, this has the chance to increase voter participation, which in primaries can sometimes be quite low. But it's also going to be a little bit confusing because people who have not requested an absentee ballot are still going to get confronted with this information. That seems largely agreed to right now by the Secretary of State, the governor's office, who we allowed to come up with modified procedures during this emergency. The general election is what there remains some dispute about. And the dispute is not that if conditions are unsafe, we should have effectively a mail-in ballot election. The question is whether we're ready to make that decision yet. The Secretary of State very strongly believes we should make the call now and move to a vote-by-mail system for both the primary and general election. The governor has indicated that he suspects we'll be heading towards a largely vote-by-mail election in November, but wants to hold out till August to make that determination. Obviously, with things like this, there's a partisan component that is almost unavoidable. But first off, no one disputes we need to keep people safe. We do not want a Wisconsin situation where people are getting infected with COVID-19 because they want to vote. So that no one disagrees about that. The question really is about whether we need to make the decision right now. So you'll be hearing a little bit about that in the coming days. The legislature may have to weigh in and be decisive and end the dispute between the Secretary of State and the governor. Ideally, they would figure it out, the two of them, because it would be truly nonpartisan if you had the Democratic Secretary of State and the Republican governor agreeing on the procedures. But if they can't agree, the legislature is going to have to step in. I suspect we would move towards a vote-by-mail option for as many people as possible. So we'll keep you updated on that. And then the final piece for tonight, and this is something I will provide more detail about in the coming days. Just like our economy is starting to reopen very slowly, the legislature's work is now at a crossroads. When we shut the State House down on March 13th, just about 2 months to the day, we said to all the members of the Senate, the Speaker to the House, me to the Senate, that we wanted the focus to be exclusively on COVID-19 response legislation, both things that needed to happen to protect public health, things that needed to get benefits to more people who were without cash, things to help municipal government and state government continue to operate, flexibility for healthcare, those kinds of things. But the day we left the State House, there were probably 20 pieces of legislation waiting for Senate action on that Friday. And it's almost like if you went to a sunken ship and you looked at the menu that was on the dining tables at the bottom of the ocean or something. If you look at the Senate's calendar, which is what is really the schedule of bills to be taken up on a given day, it's like stopped in time right now. These are all things that were on the table back on March 13th. And while I think it's too soon to start taking up some of the more controversial bills, bills that there'll be heavy dispute over, maybe conflict with the governor in a significant way, not just around the edges or on, small details. There are many other bills that we have to start getting back to, and some of them relate to the basic functionings of government, the basic functionings of the economy, and just generally making the state work. And while we know the budget picture is really difficult for next year, there are still going to need to be banks and credit unions. There's still going to be electric and gas utilities who are providing us our power and our heat. There are still going to be professions that need oversight. We're still going to need to do construction projects that benefit everybody, like roads and public buildings. All that stuff still needs to happen. And so the speaker and I talked today about starting to ease our earlier restriction and begin to allow some of the legislation which has to happen to start moving forward again. Our time in the legislature would be wrapping up basically this Friday if we didn't have this crisis. Obviously, we've been pulled away for 2 solid months now, but we don't go there just to pass bills because it's a fun exercise. We pass bills because each one hopefully makes people's lives better in our communities. And it's now time for us to start to return to some of the core work of the legislature. And so you'll start to see bills coming out of committees that don't have a direct relationship to COVID-19, which is a change, but they will be bills that really do need to move forward to benefit people in the days ahead. I would certainly welcome your feedback. Some of you have come to know me more in the last couple months through these updates, but there's much more policy out there than just our COVID-19 response, although that's our top priority right now. And so I welcome your thoughts as we move forward on a variety of bills, suggestions, desired changes, whether you like something, whether you don't like it. I'm all ears to hear all of that. And also in the days ahead, we'll be plotting out the state's economic recovery from what we're going through. And while that will depend largely on the federal government and whether they provide the resources states very, very badly need, we will be looking at utilizing this moment to re-envision local food purchasing, local food production, to work with our state college system to figure out how we map out the future of public higher education in the state of Vermont. Working with our education system, our K through 12 system, to make sure that if we ever have an interruption like this again, we're ready for it and not requiring everyone to completely overhaul their whole system in one day. And so many other things that are part of the long road to recovery ahead. So more on that in the coming days. Thanks for joining me. I'll be back with a video tomorrow at 5:30, and I hope you continue to stay safe.